about her, I started to notice, the other counterterrorism cases that were popping up, and seeing in case after case after case, informants being sent into communities not to uncover terrorist cells, but to kind of create plots and cultivate arrests that the FBI could then use to swoop in and justify a victory in the war on terror. And while kind of observing these cases, I just thought, dramatically that would be a fascinating story to explore, the relationships that are being set up between these two individuals, a target and an informant, the informant knowing that this person is ultimately going to be arrested as a consequence.
When you started talking to Sharif, that was his AKA name, Sayed Torres, for the film, you had not gotten in touch with Khalifa, his target in Pittsburgh yet.
No.
So let's talk about Lyric, you convincing Saeed to go on camera. I mean, you are getting him in the middle of a sting. The FBI doesn't know about this?
Presumably, we as filmmakers sought comment from the FBI. We have yet to hear comment, but we presume that, we had Saeed's wholehearted cooperation. This film really comes from his desire to tell his story and get his story on the record.
Even as he is doing another sting? Because that's what's so astounding about this film.
And I think it didn't entirely make sense to us either at the time. We said, why would this person agree to participate in this film? But we didn't want to question that initially. Said, let's take advantage of this opportunity. But ultimately what we realized was at the height of his career, Saeed was making hundreds of thousands of dollars, working on multiple investigations. But in 2005, after having to testify in the case of Rafiq Sabir, who was Tariq Shah's co-defendant, his identity was exposed, and everyone in the New York Muslim community became aware that he was actually an informant. At that point, he left New York and no longer had the social connections that made him valuable as an asset to the FBI. So when we met up with him several years later, he was barely getting reimbursed for gas money and was struggling to kind of make those large paychecks, those enormous paychecks that he'd been making previously in his career, which I think is what prompted him to agree to participate in this film.
And so, Lyric, how did you get in touch with his target? Presumably, Sharif did not tell you who he was now surveilling, monitoring.
Well, early on, we were committed to sort of documenting the investigation wherever it may go, and as journalists, getting as close to the investigation as we could. And we sought legal consultation early on from the ACLU and the Center for Constitutional Rights, who sort of told us our parameters as journalists. And as such, Khalifa had a public Facebook profile, which was frequently checked by the FBI and by Saeed. And because it was public and Saeed shared that information with us, we began to check his profile. And increasingly, while we were documenting the investigation, Khalifa began to articulate suspicions on his public Facebook page. Very interesting status updates like, the feds think they could send anyone to me. They must think I'm Willie Lump Lump. Things like this. So he would start to articulate that he thought that he was the target of an FBI investigation. And ultimately, his suspicions became more detailed. And when he finally articulated a name, Saeed, that the name of the informant that he